All right. So everybody has a mic? Good. Well, thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us. How you guys feeling? That doesn't sound... There we go. I like that. Ashe, ashe. Okay. Well, let's do this. Well, my name is Leah McGowen-Hare. I am a director of Trailhead Strategy at Salesforce for TMP. Trailhead is our guided online learning paths. I've been there for 7, 8 years now. And I'd like to have each panelist introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Gretchen Anderson, and I'm the head of design for PG&E. It's a new startup within a 100-year-old largest public utility in America. So we are trying to disrupt and innovate the way that we build products for our customers and for our employees.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Peterson. I'm the Vice President of Platform Engineering for the SuccessFactors product line at SAP. So that's an HR cloud software, so very relevant, hopefully, to the folks in this audience as we look at D&I. My organization is about 250 engineers spread across 6 different countries.
Hi, I'm Donna Boyer, and I'm a director of product at Airbnb. I focus on our host side of the business, recruiting homes and ensuring that hospitality is welcoming to guests from around the world. I also am the product lead for our anti-discrimination team, our market diversity team, which is the pleasure of having all with me today. Hi, guys.
Hi, I'm Jaya Singhvi. I'm a technical director at Nutanix. I lead distributed file systems team at Nutanix. We build scale-out cloud infrastructure. Thanks.
All right, so let's jump right into it. So the title, The Impact of Diverse Engineering Teams on Product Innovation, right? A lot of words. What does that mean? A great example of the lack of diversity on a product innovation team. How many of you guys heard about the Google situation last year where the Google Photo app mistakenly tagged African-American couple as gorillas? So okay, all right, I see her. You can put your hand like that, there you go. So clearly, you know, when you have, as an engineer, you're going to create based off of what your reality is, right? And if your reality, your context lacks diversity, it shows in the product. The product is a result of the creator. Now, that was a big aha moment for Google. So my question to my panelists, did you have an aha moment like that? Or hopefully before the product went live, or you thought forward thinking like, I don't want that to happen? I know, Donna, you had shared something with me afterward. I'd like to hear from each of you.
I mean, I've really come to believe that your product is a reflection of your team in so many ways. If you look at a product, you know, you can see people on the team not talking to each other, this group not talking to that group, and definitely a lack of diversity or the makeup of the team. I have a couple examples of that at Airbnb, and this one was it really struck me at the time. We had launched some controls for our homes to help people indicate whether you could smoke or not. Right? And I was presenting this in Europe, and everybody just looked at me like, you just don't get it. Like, it needs to be, do you smoke inside or can you smoke outside? Right? Because no one in San Francisco smokes. Like, that was, you know, it just really struck me then, even on so many specific details, how important it is to really understand things on a global scale, down to the detail. I've prided myself on building teams that are diverse over the past, and I had a really specific example that I shared with Leah happened last year prior to my time at Airbnb, where my creative team was pulling together examples of, I worked for a company that designed and built photo books, of the variety of books that you can do through our platform. And my team was diverse, gender, geographically, age. Like, we just had I was really proud of the makeup of the team. And we built this really good collection of, you know, Harlem architecture and children's books with families with 2 moms. And I looked at it, and we took a step back, and we realized that this wasn't going to work with our audience that was primarily about building family books in the Midwest, right? And so it was, it was the first time for me that it occurred to me how strongly it was that really we need to be thinking about building products that reflect the makeup of whoever our target audience is. At Airbnb, that's the world. In this case, we skewed so far to reflect sort of the hip San Francisco diverse makeup of our team that the Burning Man books and the roller derby books maybe weren't going to hit the mark. We caught it, though. It was out there for 3 days, but we
that's
caught
awesome. I'd rather err on that side, right?
Me too. It's the first time I felt like I've made that direction, but it was still a representation of the team and not of reflection of our market.
Right, which is important.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I worked at great schools for a long time with my friend Nikki right there. And we were trying to publish information that would help parents be aware of the achievement gap, something that parents actually said that they were interested in. So the data wonks and the policy people were very adamant that this data is about low-income students. This data is about African American students, and that is how you're going to talk about it. This is data about special ed. And as we put this in prototypes in front of parents, specifically non-middle class white parents had a really negative reaction. Why are you targeting low-income students? They aren't getting that this is a measurement of how the school is failing that group, because their orientation to school is often in opposition. They've had a bad experience in school. They've been marginalized, so they don't trust that schools are publishing information for their benefit. They assume they're getting attacked once again. So it was good to be able to go and do some user research and to avoid the public falling on our face and instead be able to come back to our team with data. I mean, we knew, we were sort of among a design team thinking, that's really weird language. Like, I don't know how people are going to like that. And to be able to come back and say, this is about equity. Let's talk about this as an equity rating. And I understand that is not what the data point is labeled in the spreadsheet. But if you want anybody to use this information, you've got to talk about it differently. So that was like a great impact of being able to get to the people and then reinforce our intuition against the data jocks.
So I thought this example that you gave brought up a really interesting point when we look at technology and machine learning. We can clearly say, the stories you guys just gave, if we build a diverse team, they will be able to represent a product better. And I think we all agree on that. That's why we're all here. When we look at machine learning, though, we're looking at things that learn from the environment that it's in.
That's right.
And so it will be a reflection of wherever you put that capability into the environment. One of the other not so awesome machine learning items that came out earlier this year was the Taybot. Now, the really interesting piece on this one, and no, this isn't my company, it was Microsoft, but that was live for about 16 hours before it was shut down because it was reflecting back discrimination and racial biases and hate speech.
Bias, yep.
Right? When you look at it, though, that's similar, not the same technology, but similar technology had been deployed in China. There's a chat bot that's been going on for 2 years, never had a problem. And so it's not always the technology, frequently it's the environment we put it in and how we use it. And we have to figure out, as a technology industry, how do we build into our design process people thinking about that, right? So I had an aha moment actually this morning at 7 a.m. on our engineering leadership call specifically about this, because I was thinking about it when I went to sleep. And the aha moment is, we are about to get into machine learning. And what do we need to do to protect? Now, the cool thing, we do HR software. One of the things we're looking at with machine learning is how do you compare resumes to job postings? So how do you take out the bias of where did you go to school? What company did you used to work at? Maybe even what country were you born in? How do you take that out and really look at, these are the skills, this is what's on my resume, do they match? To me, that's like, oh, that's amazing. I can take bias out of the equation in that piece.
That's right.
The flip side is, we are a global company. We run in about 190 countries, okay? So you have cultural bias that happens all over the place. One of the other places we're looking at using machine learning is on learning recommendations. And you're like, oh, that's great. Maybe I'm interested in unconscious bias. And I look that up and I pass that on to somebody. Well, For the LGBTQ community, talking about that in the Middle East is illegal. We cannot have our product recommend an unconscious bias training program that addresses that topic in those countries because it is illegal. And so it really brought to me we need to think about machine learning differently. I was chatting with a fabulous woman whose name I forgot, but she did a great UX design presentation earlier yesterday from Google.
Nancy.
Yes, Nancy. Thank you.
Everybody
awesome.
knows.
Everybody knows Nancy. I couldn't remember the name. And she was talking at Google. They have groups that really focus on testing those more, testing them a lot more than we would think we would need to before we put them out. And so we need to learn what are the tools that we need to be able to be comfortable putting those out in environments and really make everybody feel safe.
Absolutely. Great. Jaya, you want to add?
I have a very funny anecdote. Ours is a global company. We have offices in various cities and customers in various cities. And one of our engineers was giving a presentation in a different country with a different language. And there was a quote in a slide. And we didn't have any engineer from who knew the same language. So we used Google Translate. And the translation was not so good. And that was an eye-opener. That was big oops moment for us.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've used that translation quite a few times and didn't quite get the result I was anticipating. So definitely. So one of the things, I have pointed questions I want to ask each of you. One of them for you, Donna, and this is the tough one, and we talked a little bit about this. Airbnb has recently been in the news for some issues around bias for their customer experience. What are you guys doing, or what do you see yourselves doing to help eliminate that bias that happens for customer experience across the products?
Thanks. Back in June, the company spearheaded an effort to really look top to bottom, left to right, all over the company about what can we do to address this issue. When we started, and when I started on this team, the original place that I looked, because I developed product, right, was at product. Like, started immediately thinking about algorithms and machine learning. And as we developed the team and brought on advisors, Laura Murphy, who was a former head of the ACLU, and Eric Holders, former Attorney General, and just started talking to so many members of the community and civil rights organizations, one of the things that became really clear is that we needed to look closer in. Right? So the top things that we did was really set expectations for our community. So that was number one. We looked at our discrimination policy and fundamentally revamped that. Beginning November 1st, we're going to be asking all members of our community to commit to respecting our values of inclusiveness and respect and non-discrimination explicitly. We really looked at how do we revamp our customer support experience, how do we make it easy for people to report discrimination, recognizing that there is, in the environment they're in, it's as important to understand that people are having experiences out there. We need to make it better for them, that it's not going to be perfect. Like, we can't change racism in the world, but what we can change is the expectations that we set and our response to those. So that was our first kind of approach to this, is dealing with explicit discrimination. The second was up and down, left and right, look at our product, everything from how do we represent profiles in the system to how do people book reservations through it, and running a series of experiments and user experience designs that help put things on equal footing, from the word choice that we use to the size of the photos to increasing our use of instant book, where you can book a reservation without back and forth from the hosts. And then the third thing, and I just can't emphasize this enough, is really looking at the internal makeup of our teams. If we think about sort of what got us into this position, it was the lack of reflection and understanding of some people's experiences. For me personally, I'm a host, and I made it a point when I became a host to accept every reservation. Figured I'm just going to do this, and we'll go see what's going to happen. It was an amazing experience for my family. Like,
I saw that article about it where your kids also have a job
exactly.
and
Like my son is making cookies all the time, and and so it's been a really positive experience for my family. And it was a shocking and difficult personal experience for me to understand how my view of the world and my experience on Airbnb, especially as a white woman hosting and as a white woman making reservations, differed so dramatically from the experience of others. And we need to bring that in because, if I think about, we announced at one of our big conferences last year that we were making profile photos of people's faces mandatory. And the feedback from that was, immediately like, uh-oh, what is that going to do for my reservation? And just not having the sensitivity to the input on that before we make those changes.
Right.
I think, the things add up over time. And so we have a very firm commitment internally to make sure that our team, not just the teams focused on this, but Airbnb employees across the board are a reflection of the world that we want to change.
Right. It's sort of like what Janet was saying, having that algorithm that takes away any kind of name or anything that you can formulate a bias on and just says, is this a good match for me hosting? And taking out pictures, photos, all that good
stuff. It's about logistics. I mean, we're a community, so having a photo is important. People want to know who they're meeting, but how do we make sure that people are not over-indexing on a photo and have the confidence that we have trust, and it's a good trust match, it's a good logistics match, the length of stay is appropriate, all the logistics of the reservation, because that's what people really care about.
Right.
And how do we make sure that we make that be front and center?
Absolutely. Gretchen, when we think about gas and electric for PG&E, what are some ways a diverse team can better serve your customers as well as the communities? Because when I think about product design and diversity, I want to see what that correlation works with PG&E.
Yeah, I mean, so PG&E is North America's largest utility. We are Bakersfield to the Oregon border. We're as diverse as California in terms of our customers and actually our workforce. I think we're maybe the one organization here that doesn't have the problems that a lot of people have, at least across the board. So for me, coming into a group where I have to build tools for that workforce and eventually for those customers, I have to have designers who can go out into the field and who can empathize, as we like to talk about in design a lot, with a wide variety of people. It also comes into play when we talk about a go-to-market strategy, and this is probably relevant for all the startups around here, right? Like, my market is field workers at the moment. I have to be sensitive to their needs and how they work when I go to market with them, and I have to have people who know them, who endorse my product, just like all of you all need your influencers on Instagram and Facebook to be tweeting and retweeting. So the more diverse your team is, your early adopters are going to be the friends of friends of friends of those people.
That's right.
So Twitter looks the way it does today because of the first probably 5,000 people who joined it, for good and bad, right? Like, there's some positive stuff that came out of that, and there's a bunch of like techie, douchey stuff. So I think that early go-to-market thing is a big part of the picture.
Great, thank you. Janet, with SAP, and you talked a little bit about this earlier, but I would like you to expand on it. It's a German-based company. So when we talk diversity, it sort of changes the lens a little bit. And I looked up on your website, and it says, the culture of inclusion not only helps make us a great place to work, but drives the success of our business. Have you witnessed firsthand how diversity has driven the success of SAP?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start with the lens, because it really does change the lens. So, and just for background, I actually came from a startup, so I do relate to everybody, because I know we've got lots of startup folks, but I came from a 35-person startup in Redwood City that was acquired by a 2,000-person startup in, I guess, San Mateo, US-based, that was then acquired by an 80,000-person, 44-year-old company that has customers in 190 locations and employees in 130 locations. And so a lot of what we talk about in the US and a lot of what I think about when we talk about diversity is very different across the world.
Yes.
When you're talking about, and I see this in my team, so when I look at my team in the US, we very much focus on, do we have good racial and gender diversity in our organization? Those are probably some of the top ones. And yes, as an engineering organization, I have teams that tend a little bit more towards we actually don't have a lot of teams on the white male side, but we do in Germany. But in the US, a little bit more on the, it's a couple of folks from India or folks from China who have brought in referrals, right? And so you're bringing in great talent, but you end up with teams who do not look diverse, right? So in the US, that's something we absolutely focus on. When you go and talk to Copenhagen, which is, or India or China, a very homogeneous country, that's not a problem. They may have problems with ethnic diversity, but that's not something that we really actually gather information on, and so that makes it harder to address those conversations. So part of what I really need to look at in my team is what are the issues that we need to focus on in different parts of the organization? And gender is the one that we both as a product as well as SAP are focusing the most on, because it is the easiest to actually measure and to then say, if I move this lever, do I go in the right direction? It is also something that impacts all countries, right? So with the very few places, I think there's about 12 to 18 countries where your husband has to approve if you can work as a woman. With the exception of them, it's impacting all companies. So what does that mean? Well,
does that include transgender as well when you're talking gender across the world?
No, it doesn't yet. Well, let me say yes and no. It depends on the country. Because again, there are certain countries where you can't ask that question.
Right.
In the countries where you can ask that question, it does. Right? I'm in engineering, but honestly, we are focused the most on how do we bring more women into engineering to begin with, because engineering does not tend to be a female-dominated organization. So when I look at that particular metric across my organization, and I've done this for a couple of years, we've been really focused on how do we increase women in management. I think everybody's focused on this. The good news is in the US, we've moved in the right direction, but it's at the expense of women in the technical track. So I don't have very many architects who are female. The really interesting thing is Germany, very similar to the US from a culture perspective, not, Asia Pacific, which is very different. I have the opposite problem. I have women who are not interested in management and who are interested in the technology side. And so what we have to do is look at not the broad lens. We do as a company look at the broad lens, but look at what are the specific issues that we're seeing in the different teams, what are the specific issues that we're seeing inside of the different products. Now, as far as SAP, the broader company, we focus on, the biggest one I just mentioned is gender. It's also a 44-year-old company, and so we do focus a lot on different ages. We've got a lot of people who have been there for 20 years. We do a lot of program on allowing people to retrain and move into other parts of the organization as the technology changes, which is phenomenal. We do a big diversity, didn't mean to say diversity. We do a big focus on disability, both in our product from an accessibility. We also have an Autism at Work program, which was actually, very interestingly, started by an individual from India, where autism is not considered a disability. He had a son, didn't know what it was, researched it, found out that there really aren't programs in India, and partnered with another organization to start bringing that into the workplace. And I'm missing a fourth one. The fourth piece that we focus on is culture and identity, because that is very important across our organization.
Great. And one of the things when I hear a lot that companies are focusing on women, and as a woman, I'm like, yay. As an African American, I'm like, because I've often seen where companies will focus on women, and then they'll end up with a room 50% men, 50% women, but 100% white. So that's sometimes, I know areas, and I'm not saying that's what's happening at SAP.
No, it's really interesting. So if I can chat about that a little bit.
Jay, I'm coming for you next, so get ready.
I'll confess, I'm going to do a little product push here. We are an HR software. We write HR software. We're a full suite HR software. So many of the decision points about somebody's career actually happen and are recorded in our software. So who do you bring into interview? Who's on your interview panel? Who did you hire? What was the compensation that you gave them? Who did you promote? Where are people in compensation ranges? The whole gamut is actually in our product. And so one of the incredibly exciting things for me that is happening right now is we've been able to measure that for a long time. we're focusing on bias prevention inside of the product.
Right.
So how do we use what I was talking about before, machine learning, to identify at each and every point where you might introduce bias. So if you're looking at compensation, great. My organization is 30% women, awesome. Are they getting the same type of raises that everybody else is? And if not, identify it before it happens, not after it happens. Now, what we're doing with this is, yes, we are focusing on gender first, I confess. It is a bigger number, so it is easier to measure.
Right.
But the tools we are building allow you to do that on any vector that you want to measure. So there's nothing unique. But the gender is basically, we're basically saying that's the one where if we go there, we can make a big leap, and we can also understand the space better, but there's nothing that precludes us from then applying that across the larger board.
Thank you. Jaya, one of the things, Janet just mentioned a little bit, and I thought about, when we talk about diversity, we often think about, ethnic, we think about religion, we think about gender, but sometimes it gets left to talk about or forgotten sometimes is accessibility. And there's no way you can talk about building products and not having that conversation about accessibility. Now you work in the technology, in the product, in the cloud space, how are you guys working with accessibility in your products? And do you have, like I know we have team members that are sight impaired, so they are always adding input on our product, and we make sure that we're always meeting those accessibility needs. Do you guys have any of those initiatives on your products?
We don't have any company-wide initiative there, but what we try to do is based on each team member's needs and what their background is, what their perspective is, what their needs are.
Right.
We try to be creative how we can help. For example, if somebody has different needs, we send the material in advance. We have phone meeting discussions, and we try to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance to get their ideas across, and in my team there is nobody with that need, so maybe I'm not in the best position to answer this question. But there are different diverse groups where we try to make sure that we are including all in our decision making, in our brainstorming sessions. For example, there are a set of people who are much more comfortable to think on their feet, and they can just go to a meeting and just participate. And there are people, maybe because they come from a different background or because of the nurturing or nature, they are much more fearful of social judgment. And in that case, what we try is we try to publish agenda in advance and material in advance so that everybody gets equal opportunity.
So it sounds like you have these tactics to make sure that all the teams, regardless of how they work, that their voices are being brought to the table. They're all having a seat at the table. And those are some of the tactics that you guys use.
Yeah.
What are some other things that you have done on your teams to make sure that it's an inclusive environment in that product creation?
It also depends a lot on the awareness that we create. So there is awareness, any kind of awareness that we want to create, it will only resonate with people if they understand the purpose. So what purpose motivates somebody may not motivate the other person.
Right.
For example, if the purpose is innovations, you may bring across, okay, we can build the best product there. We can hire the best talent if we are diverse. The other could be fairness. Based on what motivates whom, we as a leadership team, or as leaders, we try to provide the purpose so that there's more awareness. We have a long way to go. All of us have a long way to go, but
that's part of it, right? Is actually, noticing we still have a long way to go and working toward it. So that's the first step.
Yeah, and that's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
We keep working towards it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I think they want to move into Q&A. Am I into Q&A yet, or we still have time? Because I have a whole list of questions. I can keep going. Well, if that's the case, well, you gotta tell me what's... Well, okay, well, this is for everybody and anybody. Why do you personally think it's important to have, and I think we kind of talked about this. This is kind of generic. I don't know. Let's go to the next one. All right, personally, why do you personally think it's important to have diverse teams in the making of your product? And, you know, beyond teams, how many of you guys are diverse outside of your work? Because a lot of times, I feel like people's diversity only comes from work. And then they go back to their own cove where it is people of the same mind. Has work impacted your diversity outside of work? That wasn't on the script. I just added that. That was good, right? That was good.
I mean, yes. I want to echo what Jaya just said, which is it's not just diversity, it's also the inclusive piece. And
right.
So I feel like I learned a real lesson. I'm a real-time person. I value that. And when I started to have employees who were more, whether because of language issues or confidence, I would notice a pattern. We have a conversation, we're firing on all cylinders, awesome, we have an understanding, and the next day I get a 7-page email from you, right? Because you went home and you digested it all.
That's right.
And it used to annoy me. And then I one day realized, no, this is actually really powerful information. I'm annoyed that I have to read a 7-page email on top of an hour-long meeting. But if I really read what this person is saying, I'm getting information I wasn't going to get before. Like, it actually is getting me to a better place personally, as well as the stuff we're working on. I will also say that when I was a kid, I came home, I was maybe about 7 or 8, and I said to my mom, you know what is so American? The band AC/DC. And my mom said, you know what's so funny? They're Australian.
Exactly.
I was like, mind blown. She's like, you want to know what's even crazier? They're playing blues. African-American soul music. What?
Yeah.
And so I feel like I have from that, maybe it's not the only genesis, but been inspired to be like, where is this actually coming from? Right? The thing that we love in media, in music, often comes from not the mainstream experience. The mainstream experience just cannibalizes it and makes it hip and then moves on from it. So for me personally, what I love about the stuff I do is like, I want this to really work. I want these products to really sing and land in the market in the hands of people who love them. And guess what? If I'm ignoring 7 pages worth of worthwhile input and not knowing that AC/DC was Australian, I might be missing the mark. So that's kind of my soapbox.
Yeah, the unconscious bias, the fact that we're now talking about it and really thinking about it is the piece that has blown my mind recently. And the one that caught me is just so subtle and simple. But we did Myers-Briggs inside of our organization, and we did it as it applies to communication and the workplace. I'm sure most of us have done it at some point in time, but the really interesting piece was I did it with a bunch of people that I work with. And so it turns out my boss and I, at the time, were the exact same 4 letters. Well, that's great, and it's why I understood him so well, and we have fabulous communication, and it's amazing, except when we realize that the 2 of us do all the communication to the broader 250-person organization, which means that we are, you know, in a nice little echo chamber to each other. It was great. He's amazing to work with. So from that, I really had that. The other piece that was amazing is somebody else in that group that I work with very closely, is almost the exact opposite. And so what that made me, and when we agree, it's an awesome idea. If we disagree, you're like, could be good, could be bad, don't really care. But so it's identifying what are those unconscious bias, even for a group, you know, like this, where we are all thinking about it, but identifying what are yours and finding your counterpoints in the organization, whether it's in design or in building a team, that you can bounce ideas off of. So I have found my counterpart in the US. If he thinks it's good and I think it's good, we're great. I also do that with all of the large decisions that we make as an organization, is I get the managers from the different locations, because I may think the way that we're going to roll out the next product or the next org change we did recently is amazing, and it really is very US-centric, and it is not taking into account very different. US is the most extroverted country in the world. Guess what? China's the most introverted country in the world. We have some challenges in that aspect. And yes, I also hate the 7-page emails. But it's recognizing your own unconscious bias that has really opened me up to, in conversations at dinner with people, with friends, being like, oh, let me draw them into the conversation because, you know, we're talking too much and we haven't given them a chance to say, and how do we bring that together?
Nice, nice, nice. Thank you.
I definitely think my experience at work has deeply affected.
Hold it closer.
Sir, deeply affected my interactions outside of work. You know, when I started working on addressing discrimination on the platform, that was frankly it was a scary topic for me. You know, I started not understanding the problem enough as I needed to. I didn't understand enough. I didn't know how to address it, and I was scared to ask. Right? Talking about race is not an easy conversation, and kind of just showing up made a really big difference for me. And I grew so much as a person through that. But what I didn't realize is so I'm on the Equity and Inclusion Committee at my kid's school. And I'm on the committee largely for inclusive issues around learning differences. I have a son on the autism spectrum and another who's dyslexic, and it matters to me just about how that gets approached in the classroom. And I realized, having done it for a year and run things like the movie night, that was more related to race relations and transgender issues, but sort of a piece that I took on. At the very first meeting for this year, I just realized how what we were doing was being approached from the perspective we were taking was just not going to make a difference, right? And so what I've learned from my work at Airbnb really both gave me the perspective and the courage to make a more significant difference in other walks of life. And really, I'm really grateful for that. But I think the key lesson for me is having the willingness and ability to put yourself out there, right? And to realize, like, you're gonna mess up, and then you apologize, and then you learn from it and you move on, puts you in a position where you can then bring others along and make a difference in other pieces of your life. And so I'm very grateful for that, but I also feel like it becomes an obligation. So yeah, I think it's not enough just to do it in the workday, but take that experience and move it on and apply it to something else.
Great, thank you. Jaya.
I had an aha moment on how important diversity is to build great products. So I'm talking from technical perspective here. When I'm collaborating with somebody who's very different from me, maybe comes from a different country, different background, even when before I bring my idea in front of the other person, what I do, I try to anticipate what other alternatives that person may have. I try to anticipate the questions that the person may ask me. And while thinking about all those things, I try to make my idea better. So even before my very first interpersonal communication with the other person, I've already made my work better. And can you imagine what happens when I actually take my idea to the person who's very different from me? He'll bring in new information, new perspective. So I'm completely all for it. Means diversity does help us make much, much better products, and makes us much better people also.
I was going to say, and much better people, absolutely. Thank you. My MC's giving me the eye. What's happening? Time for Q&A? One quick question? Well, I'm not going to be the person in charge of picking the person. Oh, okay, there we go.
Good afternoon, this is a great panel, and I have a question specifically for Airbnb. Given that there have been a lot of complaints about racism on the site, why do you want to wait for complaints about it when you have extremely talented developers who can track that and create code specifically to give you very, very detailed measurements on that happening within your environment?
It's a little bit hard to hear, so I just want to make sure that I got all of the question and repeat it back. I think what I heard you say is, Why are we not doing more at Airbnb to, from an engineering and technical perspective, take action, identify and take action on discrimination? Was that the gist of it?
I mean, she said, why are you waiting to get complaints? Why are you not being proactive?
Okay.
And very specifically, with your crew of very, very talented developers, creating code specifically to look for those instances, to track them for a history, and to be proactive about doing something about those participants or those customers.
That's a fantastic question. I think that, there's two pieces of it. One is that, one of the key pieces of responding to discrimination is responding to people who feel like they've been discriminated against. When we look at, we did a whole lot of data, we have an amazing team of data scientists, and we looked at patterns of discrimination, and we looked at how that matches up sometimes to people who are saying, hey, I feel discriminated against. And we found that there was a gap, right? And so we are doing both. One of the biggest pieces of aha moment was really the answer to, do you feel discriminated against? If that answer is yes, we want to take action on it. It's not always apparent in patterns of behavior across a specific host. And so we want to make things right for people who feel like they've been discriminated against and make sure that we take action on that side. That said, we're not waiting. We are looking aggressively at patterns of behavior. We are identifying hosts on the platform, and we are taking action on that. It's both. It's not either or. We're doing both. Does that answer your question? Okay.
We're done? Okay.
Thank you so much for being here today. Let's give them a big applause, please. Thank you.